I'm David Molko. Welcome to The Story. All the ways to communicate with us are at the bottom of the screen. You can email us at thestory@kgw.com. You can use the hashtag TheStoryKGW on Twitter, or if you're a phone person, hey, some of us are, no judgment here. Leave us a voicemail. Just call our number. That's 503-226-5090. Well, let us talk about heat-related deaths tonight. And when we find out about them, if you're keeping up, you might have noticed a difference between this summer and last summer. Now, during this week's heat emergency, the Oregon State Medical Examiner's Office has reported 5 people have died from a suspected heat-related illness. Last year, we first learned about heat-related deaths 2 days after the final day of the heat dome. As you know, as journalists, timely reporting and transparency are important. So, of course, we can share those details with all of you. So what exactly changed and why? Evan Watson explains.
Here in Oregon, we didn't think of heat that way until recently, and we have to change our thinking and change our culture. With the new climate means heat is a deadly killer, even here in Portland, Oregon.
A change of thinking for emergency response, but also for notifying the public about suspected heat-related deaths. Both state and county medical examiners' offices are sharing public notices about potential hyperthermia deaths each day as this heat emergency unfolds. Those alerts are based on the initial scene and investigation, but confirmation could take months. Last year, we first learned of potential heat wave-related deaths 2 days after the final day of excessive heat. So what changed?
I think that last year made a change in our thinking across the whole state of Oregon.
Portland Chief Resilience Officer Jonna Papaefthimiou says these ongoing notifications will likely help people take the hot temperature more seriously.
And in this case, I can just say I'm really grateful for them sharing their preliminary findings, because it's possible that the knowledge of one tragedy can motivate other people to act and prevent future tragedies.
The state medical examiner's office says it's recommending counties focus on reporting and documenting these cases in our case management system in a way that allows tracking, meaning the state can release information about potential deaths more quickly. The strategy can also be traced back to a state review of last year's deadly heat wave. The Oregon Office of Emergency Management said real-time tracking of deaths was a problem, with delays in getting that information to the public. So it recommended increases in medical examiner callouts for heat-suspected deaths. That appears to be playing out, as Papaefthimiou hopes the reporting will encourage people to check on their communities throughout this weekend.
Even if they checked on them earlier in the week, we know it's really hard on people when the heat is extended and it doesn't cool off at night. People that were doing okay earlier in the week, it's important to check on them again and to check on them every day until it cools off.
Evan Watson, KGW News.
Yeah, especially considering the duration here. Okay, here's an email we got from a viewer named Leander who wrote, I just received a text message from a number I don't recognize about the high temperatures outside. The lack of identifying information makes me assume it's phishing or a scam. Do you have any other details about this message? You know, Leander, we really appreciate the question. Here is what that text message looks like, by the way. It came from the number 88911, and it reads, dangerously warm temperatures will continue over the next few days in Portland. Now, the rest of the message is cut off. It's followed by a mysterious link, and then it says, reply with yes to confirm receipt. There's also a Spanish language version of the text. Yeah, you know what? This does look like it could be phishing. It came from an unknown number. It includes that strange link and also asks you to reply, but we checked. And yes, we can confirm this is actually a legitimate text alert from Multnomah County. So if you got this message, it's actually not a scam. Now, after we checked, this was an important point, then we clicked a link, and that brings you to this, a public alerts page with a longer version of that same message. Now, that includes resources on how to stay cool. Leander, thanks for asking us to look into this. You were right. It's usually not a good idea at all to click on links from senders you do not know. Now, these texts went out yesterday, which was day 5 of the heat wave in the Portland area. So what took the county so long? Here's what they said.
So earlier in the week, we didn't expect this heat event to be as long as it has turned out to be. And so we've had to ramp up our notifications because the heat's extended.
Well, there you go. The county says they called and texted more than 425,000 people on Thursday with that warning. Once again, if you got this text, it is legit, even though, as Leander pointed out, yeah, it really does look like spam. Okay, here's something else that has changed and for the better since last year's deadly heat wave. Oregon's 211 information line that is supposed to direct people to cooling centers and other resources. A year ago, the agency outright failed to answer calls from hundreds of people. We heard a lot of stories like this one.
I saw one gentleman who seemed to be, struggling in the heat. It wasn't quite an emergency 911 situation, so I called 211. I was surprised to find that there was no way to get a human on the line, or no way I could find, and there was no information about the heat wave at all. It was as if, the recording was from a month ago. So.
How absolutely frustrating. The reason for all of that is because 211 was actually closed during the weekend. The heat dome was at its peak. They understandably got a ton of criticism for that, promised some really big changes. Alma McCarty takes a look at the lessons learned and how the agency is responding this time around.
The sweltering heat across Portland and beyond, reminding many of last year's deadly heat dome.
It's bad, but it's not that bad. Couldn't even breathe last year.
Events and missteps from summer 2021, such as the 211 helpline failures, where hundreds were left hanging during the height of the heat wave.
There was some miscommunication and misunderstanding on our operating hours,
are now helping inform this year's plans.
We developed a punch list of things, right? Improvements. Course corrections, if you will, that we wanted to do going forward.
Dan Herman, CEO at 211 Info, said in July 2021, the nonprofit went statewide, expanding their staff to now 150 and extending their availability to maintain a 24/7 operation. So far, the team's handled around 650 calls, the majority of those from residents in Multnomah County.
We've been activated since 1 p.m. this past Monday. We're getting about 200 calls a day. The predominance of those calls are around where our cooling centers, navigation to cooling centers, and also air conditioners.
And to get that info, the average wait time for callers is between 13 and 30 seconds.
Last year, I'll mark down to a big year of learnings, not just for 211 Info, but also partners, the collective system that is support for a crisis or a time like this.
In Multnomah County, 4 cooling shelters remain open through at least Saturday. Officials reporting about 170 people stayed overnight Wednesday. That's roughly 60% capacity overall.
This spot filled up relatively quickly.
Jake Dornblazer helps run this one downtown in the Portland building.
Calling 211 is usually the best option because we report how many spots are available at each shelter. So they're going to be able to tell you which space has spots available for folks.
Tony Scarino,
It's been great. It helped us a lot.
says he's grateful for a cool place to rest out of the sun.
Pretty hard being out there in this kind of heat, so I think they should come on these shelters and cool down.
Other ways to cool down in Portland are listed here on the county's interactive map. Locate the nearest pool or misting station. A quick respite from the heat while looking ahead to cooler days. Alma McCarty, KGW News.
And speaking of cooler days, let's bring in Chief Meteorologist Matt Safino. I mean, we made it to Friday, not out of the heat yet. And you and I have been talking about this. It's not just the high temperatures, but really the duration of this whole event here.
It's really beginning to wear people down, or beginning is probably understating it, because we're on day 6 now of 90-degree weather. 2 of those days, including today, we've hit triple digits in Portland. We'd maxed out at 100 degrees today, and we've got 2 more hot days to come, one of which will again be in triple digits. Triple digits all over the place, except at the Oregon coast. Nice and cool, 60s and 70s there. And some of these numbers, though, are super, super hot, like 112 in Hermiston, 111 at Pendleton, down at Medford, 114. That is just scorching. 100 degrees, clear up I-5 until you get to about Kelso, where they stayed in the low 90s there. So, you know, by contrast, a lot better. So with all of this hot weather, you may be wondering about the drought. Now, keep in mind, drought is a long-term condition. It's not something that develops over the course of days or weeks. It develops over months and really years to get into it, and it takes that long to get out of it typically as well. But for Western Oregon, we do not have drought conditions in spite of this hot weather that we have, because again, it's a long-term thing. And keep in mind, we're coming off a super wet spring, one of the wettest we've ever had. But that's not the case for all of Oregon, or clearly for all of the West. Central Oregon still seeing some pretty rough conditions there. But things have improved since, say, last fall because of the wet winter and spring that we had, especially across the northern half of the state. Parts of California, Nevada, and Utah still seeing severe drought drought conditions. And again, this is relative to what their climatic normals are. So drought in Las Vegas is not the same thing as drought in Oregon, of course, because they're used to having dry weather down that way. Wildfire season just getting going, of course. We had the big fires down by Yosemite, and we're keeping a close eye on lightning. We're getting it again for the third day in a row. But these storms are developing late. They're going to wind down pretty quickly, too. There's been a few lightning strikes, but not that many in Deschutes County, southeast of Mount Bachelor. But we'll be keeping an eye on this, of course, as we go through the rest of summer, because really wildfire season just getting going. It's later in August and September, sort of the end of the hot and dry season that we have here in the West. We're most concerned about wildfire because the conditions can be pretty rough at that point as the forests continue to dry out. And they've been drying out with the hot weather we've had lately too. So here's what it looks like over the next 3 days. The heat wave will end Sunday night. Tomorrow, still very hot. We're up to 101 tomorrow. So that'll be our third day of triple-digit heat. The hottest day so far was Tuesday when we hit 102, and I think that'll remain the hottest day, but we're close, within a degree tomorrow. Then on Sunday, slight cooling, 97, but we should really notice it Sunday night as cooler air comes into the valley. Might even have some low clouds around on Monday morning, but it will be much cooler, 86, and then getting cooler still after that, David. So the end is in sight. It's just not tonight. We'll stay in the 70s until we get into the early morning hours. Back to you.
Yeah, I can see a lot of folks looking forward to Monday.
Yeah, how ironic is that?
I know. Thanks, Matt.
Plus, it's hard to miss all the political ads for Southwest Washington's contentious congressional race. Now, we meet the candidates and ask the tough questions.
Don't you think the president should have stopped the violence sooner?
None of this is on President Trump.
When the story continues.
Foot traffic? Our shoe gurus are trained to help you find the shoe of your dreams.
I'm the one for you and you're for me. Ooh, yeah.
TriMet is hiring experienced mechanics and technicians to work on buses and light rail vehicles. Starting wages vary but are very competitive. Plus, we offer great benefits and retirement with a generous company match. Apply today and join the team at TriMet. Learn more at trimet.org/jobs. That's trimet.org/jobs.
High energy news flash. It's getting hotter on the West Coast every year. No doubt about it. And that means very high energy use that can lead to rotating power outages. And now, over to Sally, live from an outage. It's dark. Back to you. So set your thermostat to 75 when temps are on the rise. 75 is the magic number. Just a few degrees on your thermostat can make a big difference. And good habits make good energy.
Aggravated assaults up 47%. Car thefts up 176%. But Joe Kent would defund our police.
Federal law enforcement grants. I would cut that off cold.
Catch that?
Cut that off cold.
And he'd defund federal law enforcement too.
Also cutting off federal law enforcement funding.
Joe Kent, dangerously wrong on crime. Dangerously wrong for Congress. Conservatives for a Stronger America is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Isn't it time you enjoy your outdoor living space? At Creative Interiors and Design, we have an amazing selection of outdoor furniture, including wicker, teak, and metal, along with fire pits, lighting, and area rugs. Come in today and let us help you create a look you'll love.
With all this inflation, my Social Security benefits don't go near as far as they used to. I count on the benefits I've earned. But Joe Kent wants to raise the retirement age.
Cutting Social Security benefits for millions.
I've got a message for Joe Kent. Leave my Social Security alone.
Jamie Herrera Butler has always protected Social Security.
She never raised the retirement age or cut Social Security.
Never has, never will.
I know that Jamie will protect my benefits.
I'm Jamie Herrera Butler, and I approve this message.
Welcome back. Keep sending your questions and comments to the story at KGW.com. You know what? Our team loves listening to the sounds of your voices. I really mean that. So give us a call. Leave a voicemail at 503-226-5090. Well, next week is Washington's primary. We're keeping a really close eye on the congressional race in Southwest Washington. This is the 3rd district. It's getting plenty of national attention, in part because it could be a local bellwether of sorts for President Trump's influence on the Republican Party in the midterms. Now, Republican Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler has held that seat for more than a decade, but 8 people are trying to get her out of office. Laurel Porter talked with the leading candidates this week on Straight Talk. The top two GOP candidates say she's not conservative enough.
I decided to challenge her because we need a true conservative voice in Congress. And for several years now, I've watched as Mrs. Herrera Beutler has voted for things that I know the constituents of Washington, Southwest Washington, really want. For example, the border wall around our southern border desperately needs protection. It's occurred to me as I've watched her voting that she votes more like a Democrat, particularly fiscally. And I think it's time for new eyes on the situation, a fresh voice for Southwest Washington to bring real conservative values to the forefront again to represent the people here.
Okay, Laurel also pushed Joe Kent on some claims he's made about January 6th. You want to stick around for that. That's on Straight Talk at 7. Meanwhile, the leading Democrat in the race, Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, says Herrera Beutler is too conservative.
I decided to challenge her because we need a true conservative voice in Congress. And for several years now, I've watched as Mrs. Herrera Beutler has voted for things that I know the constituents of Washington, Southwest Washington, really want. For example, the border wall around our southern border desperately needs protection.
All right, obviously having a little trouble with the sound. Heidi St. John again. Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez essentially saying she is the only candidate in the race who supports same-sex marriage, who supports a woman's right to choose, and there you go. But the congresswoman is being attacked on all sides, so she explained why she thinks she's being labeled a moderate and insists she is a conservative through and through.
This race will be looked at as whether or not President Trump or former President Trump has control over the party, which I look at this district, it's a swing district. It's independent minded. I would argue it's right of center. This is where my values were shaped, but a lot of people are looking at how this comes out and what it will mean. But do I think, so I would challenge the title moderate. I've never voted for a tax increase. I have strongly supported our Second Amendment rights. I am pro-life. I do believe that, families deserve the ability to raise themselves free of, too much government interference. But I've always been those things. The reason I think you and others give me that title is because I also get stuff done.
All right, there you have it. Those interviews tonight on a special hour-long edition of Straight Talk. Laurel's been busy this week. You can also catch it on our KGW YouTube channel. Washington's primary is on Tuesday. Be sure to get your ballot in before then. And keep in mind when you're filling in those rectangles, a reminder that things look and work a little bit differently north of the Columbia because unlike Oregon, the Evergreen State holds what is called a top 2 primary.
So what is a top 2 primary? Well, the name goes a long way to describe it. Basically, all candidates from every party for an office appear in a single group on the ballot. The 2 candidates, regardless of party, who collect the highest number of votes then advance to the general election. That's on Tuesday, November 8th. So it's possible that there won't be a Democrat and a Republican in each race moving forward. Not only that, but for the primary, voters don't declare a party affiliation to vote. Washington was the first to adopt a top 2 primary back in 2008. So why do it this way? There are several reasons, including simplifying the general election ballot, preventing spoiler candidates, and increasing the power of voters by not just slotting in a Democrat or Republican.
That could mean really interesting things for that congressional race. All right, staying in Washington, still ahead, we're hearing from the first person with a confirmed case of monkeypox in the state about just how challenging it was to get diagnosed.
And so I thought, how do I find a doctor that is going to put more effort into this?
Yeah, his story and the latest guidance from health experts when the story continues.
Stay connected during breaking news with the KGW app. Don't have it yet? Download it today at the App Store or Google Play.
Mystery in Paradise.
It's almost like an Agatha Christie.
A series of secrets to be discovered.
I'm running away from somebody that just murdered my mother and is trying to murder me.
Dateline's hottest July ever. Fridays at 10/9 Central.
A new tradition in Indianapolis. Fabulous weekend here at the Brickyard. Three flags in the air.
Joe
Biden is a disaster. Gas prices through the roof, never-ending crime waves. But Jamie Herrera Butler is fighting back. She has a plan to get America back on track. Increase American energy, oil, gas, and renewables, all of the above. And she'll back the blue. She'll fund the police, the only candidate endorsed by police. Send Biden a message. Get America back on track. Vote Jamie Herrera Butler. WFW Action Fund is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Chevy Silverado. It's got the power you want and the capability you need to do the job, so you can get to the important work. Find new moments, find new roads. Northwest buyers enjoy the open road and make no monthly payments for the rest of summer on all Silverado pickups. Plus, get 2.49% financing when you finance with GM Financial. See your Northwest Chevy dealer.
I refuse to stand by while Oregon goes to hell in a handbasket. The two parties are ruled by their extremes, and they're only going to make things worse. There's no D after my name. There's no R. Only an O. I'm running as an Oregonian. As governor, I'll move Oregon forward by being loyal only to the people, not any political extreme or special interest.
Paid for by Run Betsy Run, Committee ID 3591.
Well, welcome back to the story. We're still very much in a pandemic with COVID cases remaining high in our area. At the same time, we've been talking more and more about another virus, monkeypox. Now, both Brazil and Spain reporting earlier Friday what are thought to be the first fatal cases outside Africa, though keep in mind the CDC says more than 99% of people who contract it are expected to survive. That's a little good news silver lining there. Monkeypox spreads mainly through close physical contact and at a much slower rate than COVID. Kristen Goodwillie sat down with the first person diagnosed with that virus in Washington.
I had been traveling in the UK, actually.
In May, 5 days after arriving back home in Seattle, Ryan started experiencing symptoms
that were, odd that I didn't know, just like sort of some stuff on my skin.
He went to his dermatologist and primary care doctor, but they were dismissive.
And so I thought, how do I find a doctor that is going to put more effort into this?
Ryan found a community clinic that ran a bunch of tests, which came back negative. So he did his own research and went back to the doctor.
And then we agreed that we should talk to the CDC, and then we did. And then it sort of went from there.
And so you got tested?
Yep, yeah.
It came back positive?
Yeah, so they tested me immediately, within a couple of hours. So it was super scary, and I think the stress and anxiety that comes with that probably exacerbated the symptoms.
At that point, Ryan was the first confirmed case of monkeypox in Washington. He says King County Health was extremely helpful.
Since then, so much more information has come to light, and we know a lot more about the pace that it's spreading and how fast that it's spreading, and yet it still seems like the reaction hasn't really changed much.
Dr. Matthew Golden, who's the director of Seattle and King County's HIV/STD program, says the number of cases are doubling each week.
We think ideally we would have at least 80,000 doses of vaccine. What we have at present is only 6% of that number.
King County received its latest shipment of 3,300 doses Wednesday and have been vaccinating people at Harborview Medical Center. They plan to continue vaccinating 1/3 at Harborview, send 1/3 to providers around the county.
And a third will be administered through community vaccine events, which we hope to have up and running in approximately 10 days.
Ryan recently asked to get vaccinated and has been told by King County that he's not considered eligible since he's recently recovered.
That we have tools that can prevent the spread, and we're not using them to our fullest extent. And so that's what's tough for me to see.
His friends have gone to Canada.
So I've also considered going to Canada or going somewhere else to get it.
I've been reading a lot about this since things have changed and the lessons from COVID and whether or not they apply here. That's Kristen Goodwillie reporting. Monkeypox cases, by the way, rising in the Pacific Northwest. You see it there. 109 people in Washington have tested positive, 63 people in Oregon, and that comes as we've seen places like New York State and San Francisco now declaring health emergencies. Meanwhile, you heard it there, the vaccine supply is really limited here and across the country. The Oregon Health Authority says right now only people who have been exposed or potentially exposed to the virus are eligible for those shots. Health experts add people without symptoms, by the way, cannot spread it.
this is not spread nearly as easily as COVID-19. It does require skin-to-skin contact while someone is sick. So individuals who are developing symptoms, starting out with some initial fevers, muscle aches, tiredness, followed in days by a rash, often on the face, traveling to the limbs, maybe in the genital area, to contact a healthcare provider.
You know, like the early days of COVID, some of the thinking around this by public health officials and politicians seems to be changing every day. So if you have questions about monkeypox, something you're trying to make sense of out there, do let us know. Send an email to the story at kgw.com. Still ahead, how you can help the most vulnerable members in our community during this heat wave.
Largest selection in hybrid mattresses in the Northwest, only at Mattress World Northwest.
I can't tell you how happy I was when I found out where he was.
We learned they're engaged now. If I can find a story like this and share it with the world and it reminds them of the power of love, that makes it all worth it.
It's your journey. Own every mile in the Hyundai Santa Fe. The 2022 Santa Fe comes with complimentary maintenance and America's best warranty. Vehicles arriving daily. See your Pacific Northwest Hyundai dealer.
I'm an Oregonian. My life is an Oregon story. I was born in Klamath Falls, where family and community were everything to me. Growing up, I saw firsthand politicians put their personal agendas ahead of hard-working families. My opponents have spent decades doing just that. They helped Kate Brown push through a massive sales tax when we could least afford it. And our streets are a mess. Kate Brown, Tina Kotek, and Betsy Johnson have extraordinary power, but they've only made things worse. More than 1,000 dangerous criminals released into our neighborhoods and a homeless crisis that is devastating all of Oregon. Oregon deserves better. I'm Christine Drazen. If you're looking for a third term of Kate Brown, you've got two great choices, Tina Kotek and Betsy Johnson. But if you're looking for a new direction, someone who has actually stood up to Kate Brown, then let's do this.
Paid for by Friends of Christine Drazen, PAC ID 19050.
High energy news flash. It's getting hotter on the West Coast every year. No doubt about it. And that means very high energies that can lead to rotating power outages. And now, over to Sally, live from an outage. It's dark. Back to you. So set your thermostat to 75 when temps are on the rise. 75 is the magic number. Just a few degrees on your thermostat can make a big difference. And good habits make good energy.
You know, that music always just makes me want to dance. Just bust one out, right? I wish you could carry that on a little longer here. For this week's Hey Help campaign, we're asking you to donate to the Arches Project. It's part of the Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency, which in part helps homeless people living in Salem. Now, this week they are making sure people living on the streets are able to stay cool. You know the drill here. Aim the camera on your phone at that QR code on the screen or go to kgw.com/heyhelp. This is a micro donation drive, so feel free to give any amount, no matter how small it is. Everything helps. And since we are asking you to donate, we thought we'd take you a closer look at the group itself. Our Christine Pitawanich tagged along with the Arches Project over this past weekend as they put their extreme heat plans into action.
Yeah, so the plan today is really just getting out into the community and connecting with those that are experiencing homelessness.
Robert Marshall is the emergency manager with the Arches Project, dedicated to addressing housing instability and helping the homeless.
So we have these 5-gallon water containers, and so half of these are filled with Gatorade beverages, and then half of them are filled up with water.
We caught up with Marshall and his team as they were headed to Gear Park in northeast Salem.
We saw quite a few people that looked like they might be in need of some services.
The goal throughout the week is to spread information about cooling centers while handing out Gatorade, water, and other supplies to people living on the street.
Hey, you! How are ya?
Marshall says after last year's historic heat wave, the team made sure to plan ahead.
But this year we now have a comprehensive plan in place. If the temperatures are this, then we're going to do this. And this is how much staff and anything that we need for it.
And if somebody's in a state of distress because of heat exhaustion or heat stroke, we'll call 911 and we'll get emergency services out there. So it's a pretty broad operation, and it'll go on for the next several days.
Jimmy Jones is the executive director of the Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency, which oversees the Arches project.
We have to review our maps to check where everybody is.
Here, my love. Let me give you a couple bottles of water. Here, my love.
That man, Xavier, and others in this parking lot are grateful for the help.
I'm grateful because I know what it's like to be by myself.
They bring us water. It helps me a lot. It just makes me feel like somebody cares.
You know, that's exactly it. Somebody does care. We see it there. We saw it with the viewers who donated air conditioners earlier this week after watching the story. Yes, we can always debate and discuss, and yes, there's plenty of value in all of that, but there's nothing quite like the next step, doing something. I'm David Molko. That's the end of our show. Thank you for watching. Laurel joins me now with your headlines. The news at 6:30 starts right now.
This is KGW News at 6:30.